This week on the podcast, we have Jessica Otto from Florida Kids. We're always putting her in the hot seat. And so if you've watched all of our videos, you know that we are talking to new SLPs, we're talking to clinical fellows, helping educate people about this world of being a speech language therapist. So welcome back.
Thanks, Jen.
Tell me about self-care, like real self-care, right? When I think of clinical fellows who are in their externships right now, they're working either in a private practice, a hospital setting, they are learning on the fly. They
Mm,
might have a higher caseload, and I'm sure you can go on and on about a high caseload, and they're giving of themselves mentally and physically, right? When I think of speech language therapists, I think that you all work with such intention to treat the person in front of you, talk to the parents, navigate the school, right, in a school setting, but there's going to be that in any setting as an SLP. So, how do you talk to your team about self-care? What do you recommend of like self-care that actually works that is not going to the grocery store?
for sure. First off, I'd like to say that the CFs and younger therapists than me do an amazing job addressing and identifying this as a concerning issue early in their career. And I'm so
Mm,
proud of them for identifying that, for noticing that, for pushing back for that. It is so important because it starts at a level that's very intrinsic to us. So often I feel like my generation older than me, especially in this field, the expectation was pour it all out, give it all
mm,
every day. And I'm sorry that you're exhausted at the end of all of this. Too bad for you. Go sleep
shocking.
it off and do it again tomorrow. Like that was just kind of, and I mean, I remember graduate school having this professor, and they brought in a little boy who had hydrocephaly. And I had never, at that point in my career, I'd never seen a patient with that level of impairment. And he left. And I remember crying sitting in graduate school and asking my professor, I was like, when do we stop crying with these
Mm,
families? And the professor so kindly looked at me and said, we never stop crying. And it was like, oh, okay. But her expectation was like, you go, you pour,
mm,
you dump yourself out at the expense of everything else because this is a career path you've chosen. So I applaud the therapists who are choosing that sooner. And part of that could have definitely be how I'm wired. And I perceived that from my professor, even though she may not have said that. That's entirely possible. I will own the fact that I am driven and ambitious in probably unhealthy levels for most of those things. So, but I know there are those of us out here who are, and we get years in and then we're like, oh my gosh, I'm exhausted deeply and I'm
mhm.
burnt out. And what do I do? So I applaud you at any point in your career to ask these questions and to start pushing back. And I think that from a job perspective, having a job that's not overwhelming every day is a start where you have some consistency to your caseload and it's not always to the point where you have no spare minute at actual work. I think that is a big piece of self-care is
Yeah.
working to create that environment for yourself at work. The next step of self-care is figuring out what fills you. Is it reading a book? Is it getting a pedicure? Is it a walk outside? What do you do that is actually life-giving to you and not just something that people say should be life-giving to you? We are all so differently motivated. My family and I went over to a birthday party with a family we didn't know very well a couple weeks ago. And I have one son who's very extroverted, and I have one son who presents like an extrovert, but he actually
Mm,
is introverted. And at the end of his school day, he wants to read a book and just take 10 minutes to recharge. That's just what he needs. He needs quiet time. And at this party, he did not know that there would be 50 unknown people to him at the party. And about 25 people walked in, and a football game is gone, and all the things are happening. He's like, Mom, I could just see it on his face. I was like, do you want to go outside for a minute? And we walked outside and he was like, I was not ready for that. And he had the words to tell me that. And we took a minute, we walked around, we were quiet. And then we kind of talked about like, okay, here's what to expect. Because I didn't know either prior to this.
mhm.
Here's what to expect. And then he was so in for it. And he was fine to greet other people at the party he didn't know. He was happy to watch football with anybody who would sit and talk football rules with him. That made his day. Um, but I think about that and getting into a situation where you're so overwhelmed and you don't know what to do to take care of yourself and having something in your back pocket, even if it is a saying that you know that is encouraging to you, or a reminder of that visualization of this place, I feel so safe, I feel so cared for in this place, and I'm just
Mm,
gonna take a mental moment and be there. So you can do those things. I know my favorite thing is sunshine. And even after a hard IEP meeting, to walk outside and stand in the sunshine for just a minute and take a minute. Because recognizing I need that minute in order to turn around and be a better therapist to the next people, the next children, the next adults, the next teachers, the next parents. I need that minute mentally and emotionally to process, to think. And then sometimes I pack that away and say, okay, I'm going to take this until I can go for a walk outside and then let myself process it and let myself think. Um, I know this is longer than we usually chat, but I did want to mention too, there's a plus one in our positions. In Florida, we are mandated reporters for children who experience abuse or neglect.
mm,
And I feel like that's the plus one in our position of like our job is so emotionally requiring. There's high requirements
yes.
emotionally and physically and mentally. And then the plus one is when a child realizes that they're safe with you and they tell you horrific stories of abuse, and you now have to report that and take those steps and fight for that child. And those moments, unfortunately, should always be devastating. We
Yeah.
should be okay with the fact that that happens. But what do you do in those moments? Like, how do you sit? I know for mine, the last one I had to do, I pulled up my phone. I actually recorded just like no video, but it was a voice recording of what the child was reporting to me. And then I took the appropriate steps legally that I needed to take, but then I needed a week. I was not right mentally and emotionally for an entire week. And I
Wow.
needed to share with my husband what was going on so that he could support me. I needed to share with other therapists that I worked with because I needed them to know, because it's so deeply devastating when a young child experiences abuse and evil in a way that you just can't even fathom.
Yeah.
Um,
And
so
it sounds like
if you have,
I'm sure, like, with the rules, right, like, you don't give them details, right? I'm just probably outlining now, but you
right,
don't give
right.
details, right? But
No.
it's more of like, "Hey, like, I had to be a mandated reporter today, and I need you to handle me gently right now."
Mhm, mhm. And
Heard.
for me, I even needed like, my husband ended up taking our kids and taking them and letting me have some alone time, letting me have some process time, and I just really needed that, and it affected how I interacted with every child for a solid week,
Yes.
just super emotional and very hyper aware of all the things. So if you've had to do that, you're amazing, A, for doing that. B, make sure you take special time for whatever that looks like for you to care for yourself and be present when you're with yourself in the pain of the reality of that and in your need to process and work through that so that it doesn't stay and weigh on you.
Heard. Thank you for adding that note there about being a mandated reporter and what that looks like. I'm not sure if that's talked about a lot. And so, hopefully this video will find the right people who need to hear this about self care in general, right? And managing that caseload and being able to advocate for yourself for the caseload. But then also this additional piece about being a mandated reporter and kind of what that does to the person who works in a field dedicated to kids. So thank you for sharing that. I'm sure this will reach someone who needs it.